Kicking off a new series here in the Sanctuary, we're going to be joined by some of the best and brightest minds in the entire industry to understand 3 players that they cannot stop drafting. Today, we're joined by one of the most accurate rankers ever and the director of forecasting at 4for4, John Paulsen himself. John, as we are at peak redraft season, we really appreciate you taking time to join us. We're asking guests to pick 3 players that they cannot stop drafting. Who's your first player going to be?
Why don't you tell me, because I'm not sure which way these slides go. Mark Andrews. Okay, let's talk about. Sorry about that. Yeah, I love Mark Andrews. I am a long proponent of stud tight end strategy, all the way back to the Antonio Gates in the 3rd round days. I may be dating myself with that, but I think having a weapon at the tight end position gives you a leg up on at least half the league in your matchups, and I think it's a lot easier to find productive starters at other positions than it is to find it at tight end. Now, occasionally there's a late round tight end that really jumps out, but most of the time they're pretty predictable in my opinion. So Mark Andrews was the tight end 4 on a per game basis last year, 11.3 half PPR points per game, just off the pace of Laporta, which is 11.6, Kelsey 11.5. So not a big difference there among those 3, even though Laporta is going in the 2nd or 3rd round, Kelsey's going in the 2nd or 3rd round. Andrews is going in the mid to late 4th. He finished as the overall tight end 1 in 2021, 14.7 points per game that year. So he's got an overall tight end 1 finished, and it wasn't that long ago. He's 29 years old, which isn't much of a concern. Tight ends typically produce into their early 30s, especially the elite ones. He's never averaged less than 50 yards per game since his rookie season. He's averaged 0.48 touchdowns per game in the last 3 seasons. If he can play 16 games at those rates, he's looking at 800 yards, 7.7 touchdowns. So I think of these elite tight ends, he's probably the best early tight end value there in the late 4th round.
Yeah, and Tom, look, we're talking about a Ravens player, so I know that we expect you to wax lyrical here, but Mark Andrews moving into the 2nd year of that Todd Monken offense, are you expecting a step forward and potentially back to the dizzy heights of his tight end 1 season?
I don't know if maybe he's going to hit tight end 1 overall, but I just feel so strongly that where he's being drafted, for all the reasons that John said, that he is a complete value. Like, people throw the age thing at him with being completely oblivious to the fact that Travis Kelce is 34 years old and he's been dominant for the last 5 years or so. So why can't Mark Andrews go on a similar run? Perhaps Mark Andrews is never going to be quite as good a player as Travis Kelce is. But Mark Andrews over the last 2 seasons, despite missing time through injuries, 15 top 12 weekly finishes, 8 top 3 weekly finishes. And when he did get injured, he was leading all tight ends in touchdowns with 6, a number that was only beaten by Sam Laporta, despite the fact that Andrews only played 10 games. So, yeah, there's always going to be situations where this Ravens offense, it can occasionally let fantasy managers down because they'll pivot to run-heavy approaches like the games last year where Gus Edwards was scoring a couple of rushing touchdowns. But I don't think that they're going to have an easier ride of it as they did last year. There were games where teams like even the Lions weren't able to push the Ravens into pass-heavy scripts. So the Ravens were able to sit back, take their foot off the gas, and just run the ball. This year, the defense, they've lost a couple of pieces. I think that's going to take a step back. I think under Todd Monken, he's going to open things up even more. And all reports out of training camp are suggesting that Mark Andrews and Lamar have picked up exactly where they've been at for the last 5 years, ever since Lamar took over as starter.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Andrews. I think that the value for me is phenomenal. We use the 4for4 multi-site ADP tool. You can see he's going 57th overall on Yahoo, which seems absolutely bonkers to me, if I'm brutally honest. John, for you, it feels like every year we sort of overhype the next young up-and-coming tight end. We've obviously got the likes of someone like Dalton Kincaid. Are you comfortable clicking Mark Andrews ahead of Kincaid, who seems to be going in and around the same point in most drafts?
Yeah, I am. I mean, we know what Mark Andrews' role is for the Ravens. I mean, he's multiple years of the same role. He's basically the number 1 option at passing game, certainly the number 1 option in the red zone. All those all-important touchdowns for a big target like him. Dalton Kincaid's fine. I don't have a problem if I were to end up with him as my tight end, but I'm certainly targeting Andrews before him. And if I were to miss out on Andrews, I probably wouldn't pull the trigger on a Kincaid necessarily. I mean, you could talk about the targets available in Buffalo, and there are some concerns there with his snap rates when Dawson Knox is available. We don't know that he's going to be playing 80-90% of the snaps like a Mark Andrews plays. So I like my players on the field as much as possible. I don't want them limited on playing time at all.
Yeah, and you touched on the vacated targets there in Buffalo. We're going to talk about another player that Tom is a huge fan of. But before we get that, we are closing in on 3,000 subscribers. Help us get there before the start of the season, and hit that subscribe button down below. I hinted at it. Of course, we're talking about Curtis Samuel. John, it is another player that you seem to keep clicking over and over again. The wide receiver 51 overall in ADP. You can get him as low as 157th on NFL.com right now. What is it about Curtis Samuel that keeps you clicking his name?
Yeah, I have him at wide receiver 40, so really a great value. Has potential to finish significantly higher than that. I mean, it's no sure thing. He's not a traditional alpha. But if you follow Matt Harmon over at Reception Perception, which I do, and he's been right about a lot of receivers over the years where they're going from good to great or having that breakout season. Maybe he calls it a year too early sometimes, like he did with Tyler Lockett. Maybe he calls it at the correct time with Tyreek Hill, who was a 5th rounder at one point there in Kansas City. But I always pay attention when one of his longtime favorites, or even a 2-3 year type favorite, is seeing a significant improvement in his environment, whether it's an increase in likely targets, an increase in the quarterback quality of play, or just an increase in the general role, snaps, etc. And this is the case for Curtis Samuel, who's going to a team that lost Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis. There's tons of vacated targets up for grabs there. They don't have a clear alpha in the receiving game, and this is going to be a little bit of your pick your poison. They might try to go with what the Packers are doing with a more of a scheme-oriented offense, and they're not trying to feed any one guy the ball. But I think Samuel's versatility, where he can play inside, outside, he can carry the ball as well, will make him a useful player on a weekly basis for the Bills in general. Just looking at why he's a good route runner, Matt Harmon charted him in the 2018 to 2020 season, so it's 3 seasons. He finished with a success rate of 75% versus man, 88th percentile, which is very good in all 3 seasons. His 2023 charting was 75.4% success rate versus man, and he posted a career high 80% success rate against zone, which is great to see that a player, he's not old, but he's a veteran, and for him to be improving against zone coverage, which is what the NFL predominantly plays, is a great sign for heading into season with the Bills. A lot of zone played against them because of Josh Allen's ability to run the ball. So just looking at his last 4 seasons with 15 plus games played, he's had at least 1,613 yards receiving in all 4 seasons. He's added an average of 139 yards rushing per game as well. So he has that rushing floor, and that's key because he's reunited with his old offensive coordinator Joe Brady, who coached him in Carolina. Joe Brady got a wide receiver 25 finish out of Curtis Samuel with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, and with Samuel getting the 3rd most targets in that offense behind DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, now Robbie Chosen. So as the 3rd pass, receiving option, he still finished in the top 25, 118 touches, 41 carries, 1,051 total yards, 5 touchdowns. So I think wouldn't say the sky's the limit for him, but if you're looking at a guy as the wide receiver 51 off the board, you're hoping maybe you can get a wide receiver top 30 season out of him. And I think that's definitely in the cards given his versatility and the opportunity available in Buffalo.
No, absolutely. And Tom, we've talked about this Buffalo receiver room a couple of times so far this offseason. We saw in the first preseason game, things seem to start to be taking shape. We're seeing Coleman is basically, they're forcing him to be an outside receiver. He played 100% of his snaps on the outside. We're seeing that Shakir is kind of an inside-outside, but Curtis Samuel seems to be the movable piece in this offense now, playing 50% of his snaps in the slot and the majority of the rest out wide. Do you see that movable piece as a benefit of Curtis Samuel, or do you think it could be that as everybody slots into their roles, he's potentially on the outside looking in?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because there's definitely a danger that you can go too far down the gadget route, and that's where you only end up on the field when the gadget plays being called. You know, we saw someone like Darius Toney like this. He was only really having a relevant role when he was getting used on those jet sweeps and similar. But with Curtis Samuel, I just have so much faith in the relationship with Joe Brady. Like John mentioned, the fact that the last time they played together, he had such a good season then. And now what Curtis Samuel brings to the Bills is something I don't think that they particularly had last year. According to Next Gen Stats, Samuel averaged 9 miles an hour within the first second of his routes in 2023, which was the third quickest in the NFL. That's a metric that Next Gen Stats called burst score. And the Bills wide receivers averaged 29th in the NFL last year. So he gives them that immediate burst, getting away from the line of scrimmage, giving Josh Allen options. And we know that, you know, dual threat quarterbacks are a little less prone to checking the ball down. So it's not just saying, okay, here's an immediate option. But I think if you've got somebody who's giving Josh Allen quicker looks, quicker outs, then it can just open up more creative plays all round. And yeah, the versatility of Curtis Samuel will absolutely come into play at times this year, because even if Keon Coleman has a good season, we still expect there to be patches where rookie wide receivers struggle. Khalil Shakir, we've seen quite a small sample size from him. I don't have much faith in the guys like MVS, Mac Hollins, you know, but Curtis Samuel, he's earned targets wherever he's been. We saw in the games with Washington last year that he put up some really impressive numbers before getting injured. So, yeah, all aboard Curtis Samuel. I mean, I'm not expecting him to be even a top 24 wide receiver this year. But like John said, if you can get approaching that wide receiver 30 range and you're drafting him towards wide receiver 50, that's an incredible value.
Yeah, and then we've asked John to dig a little bit deeper for his last option. We're going to go outside the top 10 rounds for a potential sleeper. This wide receiver is going 57th overall in terms of wide receivers, but he is going outside the top 200 picks on ESPN. It is my boy Josh Palmer. John, what is it about Josh Palmer that you are excited about at the
Well, it's
value
funny to
level
hear.
this year?
It's funny to hear that he's going wide receiver 57, because I think 3 weeks ago it was 67. I don't know if my constant talking about him is impacting the ADP at all. But I don't understand this ADP. I mean, just looking at the situation holistically, you have Keenan Allen gone, you have Mike Williams gone, you have Austin Eckler gone, you have Gerald Everett gone. There are just so many targets vacated in this offense. I think Justin Herbert's looking around. He's like, who are these guys? The only familiar face really that has produced for him in the past is Josh Palmer. And he did well whenever he was called upon. I mean, he's not your traditional alpha stud receiver that's going to now post 1,600 yards receiving or anything. But given where he's being drafted, I think he's going to vastly outplay this draft position, provided he can stay healthy. And that has been an issue for him. He's been in another lineup here and there. But just talking about his last season, he set career highs in yards per game with 58, yards per catch 15.3, yards per route run 1.71 per route run. I think you guys have 1.8 there, but it's 38th out of 102 eligible receivers. So, one top third, top 40th or 60th percentile or so. That's not bad. And especially considering the loss at receiver, he's probably going to see that spike a little bit because he's going to be drawing more targets on his routes. He's basically coming off a season where he played at a pace of 65 catches, 988 yards, 2.4 touchdowns. Right there is a wide receiver 34 pace. And that's with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams playing, some of the games. Of his 10 games, Palmer's, Mike Williams played in 3, Keenan Allen played in 4. Palmer averaged 74 yards in the 4 games that he played with Allen and without Williams. One of those games was cut short due to injury. In the 3 games that he played without both Allen and Williams, Palmer posted 113, 47, 44 yards for a 68-yard average. That's solid production, over 1,000-yard type production there as well. So without Williams, and I think that's the key, is looking at the splits without Williams, because that's the role he's taking over, really, with Ladd McConkey likely taking over more of those Keenan Allen type routes. Without Williams, Palmer played at a 73 catch, 1,209 yard pace with 2.4 touchdowns, Those touchdowns are obviously really low. I think with this much yardage, we'll see that positive regression, getting him into the 5 or 6 touchdown range. Those right there are low end wide receiver 2 numbers. So now we're cooking with gas. I think he's going to be basically vying with one other receiver as the wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. That's Ladd McConkey. I could see a scenario where Ladd McConkey is getting more targets, but Palmer has more yards because of his down the field threat, higher ADOT. I could also see a scenario where, Ladd McConkey doesn't totally pan out, and Palmer is the wide receiver 1. I don't think that he has any competition other than McConkey, really. Quentin Johnson hasn't shown that he's ready to take the next step and really pressure either one of these two. Matt Harmon really likes Ladd McConkey coming out with his route running, so I'm just basically penciling him into a starting role. DJ Chark has long been a kind of a poor route runner who has been able to, post numbers here and there, but it's been a while since he's really been a fantasy factor. So really, it's Palmer and McConkey, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, in some order. And I think with one of my favorite draft plans is to find these real world wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 types in the middle to late rounds, and you can get these targets this late, and it's coming from a good quarterback. Justin Herbert's no slouch. So to me, everything sort of adds up to him really should be having an ADP in the wide receiver 40 to 45 range. I have him at 45. There are certainly ways for this to go sideways. He's not like this drop dead type talent that can't miss, but he's a solid player who has produced in the past, and he's being thrust into a larger role. And as long as he stays healthy, I think he's gonna crush this ADP.
Absolutely. And it feels like, yes, the Chargers are going to be more run heavy. Yes, Harbaugh likes to pound the rock and he's built up the offensive line. They're still probably going to pass the ball over 50% of the time. Like, there's plenty of pass attempts, plenty of targets to go around. Tom, I feel like I've been trying to convince you on Josh Palmer over the past few weeks. Are you starting to come around and believe?
Yeah, I'm fine with Josh Palmer. I think in redraft leagues, it's a little more tricky for me, but definitely in best ball leagues, I've been adding more Palmer in, and it gets to a point where you go, okay, well, if the perception everyone has is that this Chargers team is going to be really run heavy, but nobody wants to draft J.K. Dobbins, nobody wants to draft Gus Edwards, Kimani Vidal is apparently on the roster bubble. So you tell me that you're going to be drafting the other backs further down the roster who a couple of months ago most people couldn't have even named? I don't think so. And yes, the Chargers, they might be run heavy. They might not have incredible volume. But if you're telling me that I could even get Justin Herbert with, say, Justin Fields passing volume from 2 years ago, where they were averaging 19 pass attempts per game, I think that I'd still be fine with that, because I believe in Justin Herbert being an accurate quarterback and being able to get at least a few players involved to a decent level. And Josh Palmer's relationship that he's got with Justin Herbert is just so much bigger than Ladd McConkey's or DJ Chark or any of the tight ends. So yeah, I've got complete faith that Josh Palmer will have some nice weeks. He might be a little volatile at times because of the nature of this offense in redraft, but if you're playing best ball, I'd be more than happy to take him.
Yeah, and at the value he's going, you're not expecting him to be a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. If anything, you're expecting a flex play, and if he's anything more, it's a bonus, isn't it? John, a couple of weeks ago on a show with Josh Norris, I said that I would take Josh Palmer over Ladd McConkey straight up in redraft. Are you with me, or are you still got McConkey just ahead? I think he's going 4 rounds ahead of Palmer and ADP.
I would probably go McConkey straight up, just given what Matt Harmon wrote about him in terms of his route running. He's really, really big on his route running coming out of college. So I still would lean that way. I think you can have both. I don't think it's ever really a decision between one or the other. I mean, McConkey's probably going to get picked before Palmer, and Palmer will be there the next round or 2 rounds or 3 rounds later. So I don't think I do see a scenario where Palmer out produces McConkey. I do think that McConkey is probably the favorite for targets. And just to piggyback on what you were saying about they want to go run heavy, but they have a bad defense. I don't know how quickly they're going to be able to turn this around. So even the most run heavy offenses still throw the ball 45% of the time. There's still lots of targets that are going to be available. And if this team is bad, or kind of mediocre, and the defense can't stop anybody, or is at least below average, then they're going to have to throw more than they want to, and that's going to, you know, feed both McConkey and Palmer and even the tight ends with targets and fantasy production. So I feel pretty good about it. Even like if they had a rock solid Baltimore Ravens type defense, then I'd be a little more concerned about the wish that they want to run the ball, you know, pretty much every play. I don't think that's going to happen with the Chargers this year.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, they're good quality targets. You know, this isn't a Zach Wilson-led offense where 50% of the targets are going to be uncatchable. This is Justin Herbert, who, you know, is a top 5 quarterback by most people's estimations. So, no, but really appreciate you taking time to jump on, John. Really appreciate you you running through those 3 players. Before everybody disappears, if you haven't got yourself into our summer giveaway, drop yourself a comment below. Every single comment on any of our videos gets you 1 entry. But John, thank you so much for coming on. Remind everyone that's watching, where can they find you? Where can they find your work?
Yeah, at 4for4_John. You can follow me on Twitter. 4for4.com is where all my work is. I just released my draft day strategy article, which is my big, basically draft plan for the year. It includes my round by round draft targets table, which I didn't include in the first iteration. And I got like 30 messages saying, where is the table? Where is the table? So I added that, and looks like people like that as well. Yeah, and there's multiple ways. If you haven't signed up, you're not a subscription, so not a subscriber, you can use code John25 to get 25% off any subscription. And there are multiple partners where you can get free subs if you with a deposit to another site, wagering or DFS site. So check it out.
Yeah, honestly, go and check out that draft day strategy. Just got my teeth around that. Is one of my favorite reads every year. I print out that table every single year and take it to my home league draft. So yeah, a must read. Go and check out John's work and stick around, as we will have another expert very soon with their 3 must draft players.